Hello, this is Matthew Dubuque, and this is my final presentation for the class Educational Technologies at Georgia Tech. I'll begin by doing a presentation overview. To start, we'll do a project topic refresh to get everybody on the same page. I'll review the topics I've selected for my podcast. I'll provide a link to the content that I've completed. We'll discuss some lessons learned on this project. We'll discuss some possible future steps we could take to extend this project, and then we'll review the schedule and progress made. So once again, to get everybody on the same page, I'm pursuing the content track, and I'm doing this to contribute educational content to the community in the form of a podcast. Specifically, this is a history podcast. The title is History, Filling in the Gaps, and it is a podcast aimed at addressing historical events and people that are not normally covered thoroughly in a typical education. So choosing the podcast format also provides the benefit of extending learning opportunities to almost any activity. And as you'll see, some of these topics are definitely off the beaten path. In total, I delivered 4 podcasts. The first podcast published was an introduction. This provided an introduction to the podcast, so it gave the audience an idea what to expect in the next podcast, the niche I was hoping to fill with this podcast, and just let everybody know what to expect. The second podcast published was about General Vo Nguyen Giap, who was a Vietnam general. He had a very interesting life, a very successful general, just extraordinary person. I'd been interested in him regardless, so that was a really neat one to do. The third podcast published was about the Japanese super ships of World War II. So this goes over a lot about their amazing battleships that they constructed, and spoiler alert, it also discusses a gigantic aircraft carrier they built towards the end of the war that not many people know about. So that was a neat twist. The fourth podcast published was about Hedy Lamarr, who's considered the mother of Wi-Fi. She gets a lot more credit for being an extraordinary actress. She was gorgeous, but she had brains and beauty. She was an incredible inventor, and she didn't really get credit for it when she lived. So it was neat to be able to tell her story a little bit. At the bottom here is the link to the podcast page where you can actually go and view all this content. So if you had clicked on the link on the previous page, this is an example of what you would see. It's hard to do a video of a podcast, obviously, so I just did a screenshot to give you an idea of the platform that I've created. And you look at that, I mean, you see all the content that I've created is easily accessible. You just press the play button and it goes. You can like, you can share, you can download it, and there's an area for comments as well. So this is an interesting slide here where I'm actually showing an example of the analytics page that's provided as part of the podcast publishing platform. And you can see that some people actually did listen. So in a couple weeks, I got 27 listens. I think a lot of those are probably from peer reviews, which I really appreciate, and that was very helpful. But this is just kind of a neat slide to show that I could actually see the reach the platform was getting. So this project doesn't actually have to end here. I mean, there's definitely some possible future steps that could be taken, which I'm considering doing on my own. We could expand the podcast to other platforms such as Apple and Google, who have a bigger reach than Podbeans, which is the platform I've used so far. This would increase the reach and audience, which is great. It would also force some improvements. To be allowed on these platforms, you have to have the certain threshold of logos and content or descriptions of the platform, things like that. I might have to beef up a little bit. It would also open up the possibilities of doing advertising to try to increase traffic. I think it would be important to build up a base of users to have an audience. Another thing is I could definitely improve the tool set quality. I bought a pretty cheap microphone off Amazon for 30 bucks or so. I could easily spend hundreds of dollars, but I think $100 would probably do just fine. I also did a free audio editing software. I could pay to beef that ability up as well. The one I had was a little bit difficult to use. I'm sure the ones that you pay a few $100s for are probably a little bit easier and better, obviously. I already have some potential future topics in mind. Ada Lovelace, she kind of reminds me of Hedy Lamarr, where she did a lot of amazing things and she didn't really get much credit for it. But she might have been the first computer programmer, so she has a really interesting story. We could talk about the Ethiopian Empire, which existed from 1137 AD to 1974 AD. and most people don't know all the extraordinary things that they accomplished. Crazy Horse has always been interesting to me. He was an American Indian warrior. I read a book about him when I was a kid. I would love to revisit that topic and provide a podcast on it. Stuxnet and Shamoon cyber attacks. These are really cool. So everybody knows about Stuxnet pretty much, but Shamoon is a little bit less known about, and it was extremely damaging to the Saudi oil company. And it would be interesting to go into the details about that as well. All right, so what did I learn? Well, through this project, I learned a whole lot. I have a whole new respect for what it takes to make a high quality podcast. Definitely a whole new level of respect for these guys. Tools are important, especially the microphone. I had a lot of issues with my microphone where the quality seemed to differ between podcasts, which wasn't awesome. The peer feedback was really helpful on this project, even when it was uncomfortable. So I had friends listen to my podcast and give me the honest truth, and the peer feedback from other students was really helpful. Having more time or a partner would have helped a lot. I actually thought this project would be a really good solo project, but now that I've done it, I think this would have been ideal to have a partner to help you bounce ideas off of, to help you do the research and help you talk about topics, and maybe even break down the topics to have a partner focus on different portions of the subject. All right, let's go over the final schedule performance. So this is the schedule I proposed, and as you can see, it's all green. I actually got it all done. I even took the deep breath there at the bottom. So that's great. So I completed all the originally scheduled and agreed upon tasks. Some of the podcasts were a little bit shorter than I originally hoped due to time constraints, just because they took a little bit longer than I expected. But I was able to deliver all four, and I think each one has enough content to be viable. And yeah, I'm ready for that deep breath. So finally, thanks. Any questions, please email me. My email address is right there. I really appreciate all the feedback I've gotten this semester, and it's been a really great project. Thank you again.